Hey everybody, welcome back to Much Monday. Today I want to talk about the Sonic the Hedgehog movie. It's been out for a minute now at this point, so I've had some time to sit with it. Maybe you've seen it and hopefully you've been able to think about it too. It's kind of a weird movie, so I guess you could consider this like a pseudo review of it. I'm just going to talk about some specific things that I think kind of made the movie go wrong. Spoilers, I didn't care too much for it. It's fine if you like it. I know most people seem to be a lot warmer on the movie than I had expected, but that's fine. You know, we're all allowed to have different opinions. Um, the thing that I thought most interesting about this movie is the fact that it felt like it didn't have a cohesive identity of its own. It doesn't seem to have much of a focus or understanding of its source material, of what it should be trying to do with Sonic the character. And so they opted for a kind of simple, basic run of the mill road trip movie, the kind of thing that we've seen hundreds of times before in movies. It, funnily enough, feels very much like a relic of the 90s or like an older era where they would try to do these kind of real world mixed with cartoon characters kinds of movies. This idea that you need to set that kind of movie in a very realistic setting, have the human characters be the focus of the movie, you know, and that's the way you get people interested in live action cartoon characters. I don't think that is necessarily true anymore, based on what we saw with Detective Pikachu and how that movie was able to set itself completely in the Pokemon world and have the focus be as much on the computer generated characters as on the human characters. Now, I don't want to totally just compare the two movies at this point, but I think a couple of things about Detective Pikachu that work show what I think doesn't really work so much about Sonic, specifically the fact that, number one, Detective Pikachu really swings for its premise, whereas, again, Sonic has a really sort of simple, what even is the point of the plot here kind of movie going on. Detective Pikachu also feels like a cohesive, lived-in world. Like I mentioned, they live in the Pokemon world, whereas Sonic, it takes place in our world, but doesn't really feel like its own unique place. And the other thing is that the relationship between the main human character and the main CG character in Detective Pikachu, I thought was really interesting and believable, and leads to some emotional moments in that film. Whereas I don't think that really works very much for Sonic. And I think the human characters are probably the least interesting thing about that movie. I hope that if they do more of them in the future, that they will introduce more Sonic characters, because that's what I wanted to see. You know, I wanted to see Sonic. I wanted to see those kinds of characters. So in a nutshell, that's kind of where I'm coming from with this movie, and I think Detective Pikachu again is a great example of what my problems might be, is the fact that there's sort of a lack of focus going on. There's a lack of central identity to what Sonic the Hedgehog wants to be as a movie. Now, going a step further, what I find kind of funny about that is that arguably Sonic the Hedgehog, the series, the character, has that same problem on like a meta level. The idea being, he's been around since the 90s. He's undergone multiple redesigns, relaunches. When he went 3D, with the Sonic Adventure games, they redesigned him. He's had multiple different cartoons where he has totally different, designs and iterations. When they did the Sonic Boom games, he was totally different again. They had another cartoon series for that. They had a whole series of games that took like a sort of storybook premise for some reason. There's the one where he is a werehog. Sonic, sort of every time he goes out, tries to do something totally, completely different. And I'm not the first person to say that kind of is confusing and maybe even alienating for a lot of his audience. People that liked one type of game, next time around, it's something totally different, And it's not necessarily as if those games aren't all equally well received. It would be one thing if every single time they try something different it works, and it's interesting that they're trying something different, because maybe Sonic is a character that could try a million different things. It seems more like the people even making those games don't really necessarily know what they want. And I also know for a fact that in the 90s, when they were first making Sonic a thing, they made, the multiple different cartoons about him with the explicit intent that the idea wasn't to create one cohesive vision of Sonic, it was to just get Sonic everywhere. It was to have him in the games, and then the multiple different kinds of games they had even back then. There was the Saturday morning cartoon, there was a syndicated cartoon that they had, and both of those cartoons were different, the idea was just get Sonic in front of people's eyeballs, So I find it really interesting that his first live action feature film movie adaptation also doesn't seem to really know which version of Sonic it wants to pull from. Is Sonic a character from the 90s? Should we be catering to that audience of people that first was interested in the character, first fell in love with the character? Are we going for children of today that maybe really only know him from Sonic Forces or Sonic Mania? Again, two totally different games. Maybe the Sonic Boom, crowd. This movie doesn't really feel like Sonic Boom at all. It's kind of confusing in a way. You sort of ask yourself, who is this movie even for? There's jokes in the movie that, you could argue, well, they're for the parents of the kids going into the movie. There's Sonic makes a weird ZZ Top reference at one point. What 10-year-old or even what, some person my age might recognize what ZZ Top is, but why are we supposed to find that funny, There's two different extended jokes about Olive Garden, and it just sort of is confusing to me. I don't really get what the people making the movie were trying to go for. I get the sense that somebody high level with, whether it was a producer with creative control or just, disagreements between, executives or something, somebody with the power to make decisions on this movie seem to have a different idea of what they should be doing than maybe everybody else. You listen to interviews with Ben Schwartz in particular, the voice of Sonic, really seems to love the character and really gets what the character is. And even though I think he did a really great job for what he was given, I don't see his understanding of the character translate to a larger understanding of the character in the film. And even Jim Carrey in some interviews seems to get what people like about Sonic. There's some interesting ones I've seen. And his portrayal of Robotnik is interesting, but also made me sort of understand that Jim Carrey's kind of terrifying when he needs to be, which I guess is good for the character in context. It just made me really uncomfortable some of the times when the dude just seems totally unhinged. But I guess that's what I'm going on with here right now. It's a movie that I think on the one hand they tried to play really safe, versus again with Detective Pikachu, coming up with a premise that is really just bizarre. The Sonic movie feels really, really safe in comparison, and at the same time feels like they maybe didn't really know what they were doing or what they wanted to do, or maybe didn't have confidence in the ability to really go with what they wanted. So you kind of just get this weird mishmash of a lot of different concepts, and I think that's kind of a shame, because they could have done something really cool and really interesting. The movie opens with an animated sequence that takes place in Sonic's world, and I was like, well, we should just do this for the whole movie. I know it would have just been an animated movie at that point, but that had a cohesive design and an aesthetic and a look to it that I thought was really interesting. So we can see what happens with the next one. There's going to be a next one, I'm sure, because the movie's doing probably way better than anybody expected. But yeah, that's just my take on Sonic this time. Like I said, it's cool if you like it. I would actually love to hear what you like about it if you liked it. I don't hate it. I'm not angry about it. This isn't meant to be a hate video. This is mostly just me trying to talk through some of my feelings on it. Man, my window, but the sun's coming up right now and it got really, really bright. It's probably going to mess up the end of my video there. But anyway, thanks everybody for hanging out. I'm coming back to this one. You might have noticed I skipped last week. It was President's Day. I had family over. I just decided, it's a holiday. Let me take a break for this one. I had proved to myself that I could do this at a sort of consistent level. So we're going to keep doing it. I'm debating doing a more in-depth Sonic versus Pikachu movies head-to-head. So if that sounds interesting to you, let me know. I will do that. If you'd also want to do a video about like how audiences work and sort of a more in-depth explanation about why, with like explanations of demographics and things like that, and why every piece of media is aimed at a particular audience. I could really go in depth on that with like some research and background information and things like that. So if that all sounds interesting to you, let me know. So everybody, that's going to be it for this one. Please, if you do like these videos, remember to leave a like, drop some comments to give me some feedback and just keep the discussion going. And if you haven't subscribed already, please do remember to subscribe so you can be here for every single one of these discussions every Monday. But until then, I'll see you guys next time.